Hey everyone, and welcome to the Curious Refuge podcast. I'm Fred Grinstein. I'm an instructor with Curious Refuge, leading our AI for documentaries class, but I'm also like a lot of us. I'm on this journey to learn how these new technologies are changing our creative industries. How can we grow, adapt, and thrive with all these new possibilities and changes? The more I learn, the more I realize that I have a lot more to learn. And that's what we're here to do. Today, we're honored to have Reza Sixo Safai with us to talk about how he himself has been navigating this historic moment in tech and media. He's a true visionary who's been redefining boundaries in both filmmaking and AI innovation. A multi-hyphenate actor, writer, and filmmaker, Reza's career took off with early acclaim at Cannes and Sundance with his powerful performances and his genre-defying productions like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. He's also brought his creative flair to high-profile advertising with The Massive Agency, working on projects with legends such as Lady Gaga and Karl Lagerfeld, and now as one of the early filmmakers to bring AI-powered storytelling to major festivals, Reza continues to push creative boundaries. Through his work with OpenAI's SORA and collaborations with Tribeca, he's pioneering new ways to harness AI for storytelling and advocacy, especially in the fight for justice in censored regions. We're going to talk a lot about that in the conversation ahead. I'm thrilled to dive into his incredible journey, his insights on AI in film, and his bold vision for the future of creativity.
AI is being used for scripting, for shooting and producing movies.
AI is being used for everything.
Hollywood production is being transformed by artificial intelligence.
I'm looking at this whole democratization word. You know, it means a lot to a lot of people. I think to people outside of this space, it sounds like a big word and it sounds like they're being shilled. I look at it that it's connected to these different turning points in our creative industries. I think whether we want to go all the way back to the printing press and the way that a book suddenly became a lot easier for a lot of people to make books, literacy levels went up. I look at my own industry, unscripted TV, that smaller cameras, cheaper editing systems, and a whole bunch of people saying, what can we do with these things, literally created a whole world of jobs, an entire cable TV landscape. And you could say the same thing about YouTube, but also even the independent cinema movement. I think you have such an interesting perspective, and I'm really excited to dig in because you aren't sort of this traditional bedroom filmmaker that just emerged in the last year and became democratized and is very much that story. I think you get to see this having been a writer, having been an actor, having been a filmmaker. Where are you with this kind of, some people think of it as a meme of democratization or a big idea. Where are you with this stuff?
Wow, that's a really wonderful question, and you know, thanks by the way for having me. It's really cool to be here with you.
Lucky to have you.
You know, your first episode. So let's kick it off. You know, look, I love making art. I just start there. I've always, you know, whatever I have had, I've made art with it. So I mean, right now I was just trying to think, I was like, when was the first time, you know, I really had kind of an independent spirit and made a film-like thing together with a group of people. And like the earliest memory that comes to mind is I lived on this little block when I was in fourth grade in a suburb outside. It's called San Ramon. I was just there briefly in the Northern California. And I loved Kiss, you know, and like the band. And I was like, you know what? Why don't we put on a Kiss concert and everybody will come? And they're like, Reza, like, how are we going to do that? I'm like, who cares? We'll figure it out. And we got, you know, this babysitter to do our makeup, and we got the instruments, and we went around, you know, passed out flyers, and the whole, you know, block came and sat in my garage and watched us put on this Kiss concert. And it was just like this feeling of, you know, like if you have this crazy, creative, fun idea that you want to do, and you get a couple people interested, you know, that believe in what you want to do, you can make it happen. And so, you know, I in the indie film space, that's certainly been the case, because, you know, like the smaller your budgets are. I mean, you talked about the digital camera revolution, you know, for you. I mean, I saw a lot of these iterations, like, you know, when the first digital cameras came out, I did this movie that I not only like had the lead role in it, but I got a credit for perseverance because it was the first time anyone had shot this many hours of footage, you know, and you could. So like, I love it, when new technology comes in, because you can kind of, experiment. And it's happened with film and stuff too, right? Like the French New Wave was the same thing, right? Because it's like they had smaller film cameras, they could start running with it, and people hadn't seen people shoot movies like that. Or so, it's been throughout the history of, I think, probably art, but certainly the art that I know the most history about is film, and it's the shortest history. But and I've lived through, cycles of some of those revolutions, like when first digital editing came into play. I played on the first like Final Cut Pro and the first Adobe Premiere. And, I remember people, some people were like, well, this isn't really editing. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, just because we can cut it out of order and digitize it, why is that not editing? But they had a really good point. They said, look, when you have film, the editor actually has to see all of the footage, right? And so they become familiar with the movie in a different way when they edit. So the art form of editing, kind of. So I was like, okay, well, we can apply that. Just because we have a bunch of footage doesn't mean we can't watch that. So we can kind of learn from the older technology and apply it, to the new stuff. So, I guess where I am with democratization is I'm just like, first of all, I don't think we're really there yet, clearly, but I think it's a step in the right direction. And why I say we're not there yet is because, there's a lot of people who can't afford the technology, right? Unfortunately, I can't say much about it right now, but, we're in the progress of working on something bigger with, governments, that we are going to help make that happen for people who don't have access to the technologies, and we'll just help in every aspect of that in order to people who don't have access to be able to make movies using AI. I actually, just kind of briefly to say this, is like I actually did this for a little while with children below the poverty line in LA. Through a grant, I was making films with digital cameras with kids from kindergarten to like fifth grade, and it was so awesome because most of them had never had a camera, and then much less did they think they could make a film. And I still like get chills. I've, like you said in your thing, I've been to Sundance, I've been to Cannes, and all that stuff is great when you see your movie and you get screened, on the big screen, and people are watching it, and you're, watching the world premiere. That's all amazing. But equally, if not more amazing, was watching these kids watch what they had made on the screen, and just like the joy they felt, like, this, because part of my journey has been like trying to feel like I belong, in this world. And you got that moment, when I looked over at them and saw it, you could feel it, like, oh, I belong here. So I don't know if that, hopefully that answers your question, but certainly I think it's an exciting time, and I think we can go forward towards that moment. But, it's just the very beginning.
That's beautiful. Because like, I think so much about this idea of people getting let in to tell their stories. I think my biggest curiosity is how this all becomes a new ecosystem of commerce. But at some point, eyeballs and platforms getting filled, I think, do start to enter that cycle that YouTube seems to have created a long time ago, that at some point communities get built, eyeballs come. But it's so interesting that you went straight to these sort of younger people, and how do they get to sort of be part of this generation that just gets to think differently about what permission they get to be a part of something. What do you think that, I was thinking a lot about this, like at some point, like the creativity of filmmaking has always been, at least what we study in film school, what we sort of perhaps aspired to as individuals that are, I think you and I are on the slightly older end of the spectrum compared to a lot of people coming up. There's a scarcity to it. It's built around some notion of, whether it's the people that waited the right tables or got into the right mailrooms or had the right family connections or whatever it is, that was sort of an assumption. And whether that created a pay your dues dynamic or minimally some kind of mentorship kind of dynamic. I was recently listening to John Landgraf, who is, a legend to me, is, still, kind of so prolific. And he had this amazing moment at the end of his interview where he, by most accounts, was kind of like arguing for let's not abandon this thing that works pretty well, writers' rooms, their process at FX. But he was asked this question of like, all right, well, who do you want to work with someday? Like that kind of throwaway question at the end of like a production interview of like, oh, here, send up the bat signal to work with Kate Blanchett or whatever it is that usually equals in industry. And for someone who was kind of implicitly railing against a lot of this energy that's coming from AI, his answer was beautiful because he said, and I'm going to paraphrase this, like, I want to work with that unknown filmmaker with that new idea that I've never heard of, and I want to cultivate it and make something amazing. Meaning, I think the people we still aspire to or learn from and grow from are in the same headspace. That what's great about this when it works is that more stuff happens, new stories get told. And I love that sort of comparison between where his aspiration is and where you're doing the work. Like, what do you think it looks like? Because I think to me, one of the dirty secrets of AI is how easy it is. Like, it's actually really easy to use these tools. Like, I mean, then being good at it and telling a good story is the next level up. But the notion of like it was hard to, run a Panavision camera and like sort of learn Final Cut Pro and all these things. It's actually getting really easy. What does it look like when an entire high school, of kids all know how to do this stuff and they're all expressing themselves? Like, where do you go with something like that?
Yeah, no, that's really amazing to think about. Just the amount of creativity I've seen come about with the AI, tools. There's a lot of, I've been really excited to see, to hear stories like, housewives who had given up their careers as being an, artist in order to raise their children. And then all of a sudden, while their kids are at school, they discovered AI and are making really amazing art, so that all that stuff is really incredible. I mean, I think, I will say that, I agree it is easy to use on some level, AI, but it's also like,
well, it's accessible. Let me correct. I don't want to undercut people that are really good at this stuff. It's accessible. Like, it's something that invites people.
It is. And, it's certainly, I would love to see someone do a price point, of a tool that's available for, a kid to use versus like if they bought a camera and then, what that would look like. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I just think, just like the different revolutions we've done. I remember another school that I went into, it wasn't actually about making films because I also used to produce a lot of music, mostly in the drum and bass genre. And but this one person I worked with, we had our own art collective in Santa Monica, and she said, Reza, there's this kid in this high school that I think would really benefit from getting to know you. And so I showed up, and he had the most amazing beats in his head, and also some really incredible melodies, that he wanted to put down, but he didn't have any equipment or anything, And so I brought my laptop in, and it was so funny. It was such a great image when I think about it, because they put us in this auditorium, like theater auditorium, that wasn't being used at all. So just imagine, like, he's got the headphones on my laptop, and I'm teaching him how to use Logic Pro and, get the beat going and all this stuff. And we're the only two in there, right, in this huge space that was supposed to be, for him to, learn music on some level, but they weren't able to provide at the time what he needed to do. But just to see again, it was that excitement when you have a creative energy inside you, and then you get to see that come to fruition. It's incredible. I wake up sometimes because I have an idea or like a dream. And I did that with the Tribeca SORA film. And I would just like lean over, I'd pick up my phone and just quietly, so I wouldn't wake up my wife, and put my idea in there. And then I'd kind of go back to sleep and then come back up and then look at it. That was, and I was like amazed that it was so fast, that my dream, I was able to see my dream, or the version I was wanting to see. So I think it's going to be explosive. I think, what I hope is that we continue to let people know the value of filmmaking and storytelling, because there are, and again, I think that's simple to learn as well. It's just, you just need to be taught it, but to understand, why we shoot certain angles, why we put the camera where we do. And even if you're going to completely, because I think there's going to be new types of storytelling that we're not even aware of, even if you're going to completely throw it all out, but just to know it, because you can tell when you watch now, films that people make, you can tell when they understand, the storytelling, or they understand editing. I'm also excited because I like what you say about like kids, work, in high school, kind of that setting, because, I did this thing with what do they call it? Synthetica cinema synthetica. And it was a 48-hour film fest, but it was the only one, it was using AI, but it was the only one where you actually worked with people in a room, right? And that was mandatory. Like, you couldn't do it, remotely. And there was something about just being in the room, creatively talking to each other, sparking ideas in person, even though we were, going to be generating this. And we shot footage that we then, changed it with AI. But I still thought that experience of us coming together to create with AI, it's, to me, it's been one of the most gratifying experiences, I've had in terms of, like, first of all, I think those people are now lifelong friends, which is really interesting. But also, I don't know, there's just a different excitement. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the idea of being able to also create something on my own. I've always been envious of writers, and whenever I want to go make a movie, but that's why I actually got into making music, because I was like, you know what? I don't have to wait for the funding to come together. Like, I can just make this track in my house and it's done, and I can put it out and it's boom, it's great. But there's something about collaborating with people too that's really special.
I mean, I similarly, I used to envy my kind of just after college roommate who was a painter, and he would just he would get to just paint stuff and change his minds. And I'm like, I don't get to do that. Like, if I'm making a TV show, I have to go waste a lot of time and energy. But like, I think that kind of goes to my next question for you is, I think there's so many interesting people coming to the space and so many interesting people pushing it forward. I think you're sort of, whether it's all the hyphens or whichever way we get to refer to it, whether it's actor, writer, filmmaker, I think you have a perspective on what people that have issues with this stuff could be feeling or thinking or going through, and without having to litigate lawsuits. I think to go to this point of what you're talking about is that you really found joy in this collective act of filmmaking, which is something that a lot of people feel like is slipping away. That, we don't get to be all on set together or something. I personally think there's a gray scale, and there's some people that are better filmmakers, and then there's these settings. What do you think about how this is shifting what some people would call like the glory days of what cinema is all about? I think there's some people that love this sort of on-set experience, but you got to experience a different version of it. And as a writer, as an actor, how do you kind of dispatch back to people that aren't where you are? How is this creative experience either jumbling up that classic experience or something new? I don't know. I'm curious how you react to that.
No, that's a really complex question, and I think I can speak about it obviously from my experience. It's funny because I was just talking to a producer friend of mine who's produced a lot of amazing films, and she was like, Reza, you're always, you're not scared of stuff. She's like, you're always like, looking at the new thing and just kind of embracing it, and I, really, I don't know. I liked hearing that about myself. I was like, oh, really? That's how you see me? That's really sweet. And so, that was my way in, I was really curious. I've also been around tech all my life because my dad, was an inventor at like Hewlett Packard, um, and I grew up with that stuff. So, whether it was like from video games to whatever all else, but, um, I mean, look, I don't think anything is going to go away. You know what I'm saying? Like, and what I mean by that is, you know, like the example I give is like, the biggest movie of, or one of the biggest movies of last year, right, was shot on film, right? Shot on 70 millimeter film, made $1 billion at the box office. And, so it's like, vinyl sales are up. I have a huge record collection. I still think there's amazing magic to shooting film, that it has a soul that like other things don't have. It has its own thing. And so, and when I go to like and when in LA, when you go to like, any of the Tarantino's theaters, I mean, it's packed with young people watching these old films on celluloid. You know what I mean? So it's like, so I just, I think these things are going to coexist. Of course, there's going to be a shift, but I also think that we're very short, or not short, but we haven't really seen a lot of AI with live action yet, and I think we're going to see more of that. And I think that's going to be really exceptional. The way that they're going to coexist, like where it's actually, you've made a creative decision and a budgetary decision to use AI in this section, and not in this other section. Like, I think there's going to be some really amazing indie sci-fi films, because of like kind of scope and scale that you can do on a much smaller budget. But, to speak, I mean, to the different creatives, I think one of the things, and this is another mission, it's interesting that we're talking about this. And again, sorry to be so vague currently. Hopefully we'll be able to announce it soon. But one thing I'm working on, we'll hopefully be able to announce, is a thing where, we'll have a big platform, but where we can introduce interested, curious filmmakers in whatever thing that they're doing to these tools, and to talk about it and see. And like, and I think, from my experience, what I'm seeing is that the people who know least about it are the ones that hate it the most. That's just kind of, but I will say that like on, I don't consider Twitter real. I don't consider social media real. So like, I just kind of go off of more, personal, conversations that I have with people. And I'll tell you, like, everybody who I've spoken with who is in traditional filmmaking, has been very curious and interested. I'm bringing, people slowly into like working together, on things that make sense. I just think there's going to be room. And my thing is just, I'm like, try it out. I mean, look, the legality of the stuff that you mentioned, that stuff is going to work itself out. Right. And I don't, I don't know, I don't want anyone to be, do anything illegal. Okay. Of course, and let's follow the, whatever our unions and, whatever things, rules it's set. But, I mean, we don't have to, but, if you're interested, if you want to learn these tools, I think, there's so much, I'm sure all the creatives I know, they have tons of ideas, but, in filmmaking, it's a miracle to get a film made. That's what we always say. It's a miracle that we got this movie made. And I just think, as we continue to move forward, that miracle is going to be easier to obtain. But I also think it's going to be just as hard to make a great film. And I also don't think acting is going anywhere. I look at like, no offense to any of my friends and, people have made some incredible stuff with AI, but I have yet to connect with a character. I can connect with the idea of some of the things I've seen, right? But I have yet to connect with a character the way I have with the movies that have moved me, because there's something, I think it's inherently, there's something about the human, right? being and the great actor that's inhabiting that character and, with their technique that makes us, makes me feel like, okay, I relate to what's happening and I completely lose myself. I don't know if you've heard this, but I love it. I think it was Peter Brook, and I really subscribe to it. It's like, I mean, he talked about theater. I think it's true with cinema and then whatever screen you're looking at. But, he kind of talked about like, there's the audience, right? And then there's the thing you're looking at, whether it's the stage or the film that's made. And there's this moment that happens when the two come together where you're completely lost in it and they're lost in it. And the movie, it's kind of easier because it's edited and hopefully it is lost in it. And that moment, there's the divine happening, above us, in between there. And, and I have yet to experience the divine with AI filmmaking, right? But it's coming. And I'm excited for that moment.
It's interesting. I mean, I just was watching Fleabag again. I'm doing a lot of rewatching lately, just as a hobby. But I don't know if you're a fan of that show, but
I love it. Love it.
Season 1. I mean, what a turn! It goes from a comedy to a drama. But yeah, like, how do you even try to capture that kind of performance? And I guess like it'll be a feat of technology when it can, but it's still, it's very literally imitating a human at that point. It's very literally trying to take a human's job. But I think I'm with you on your initial instinct here, is that I think the most interesting thing, at least for the shorter medium term, is going to be some kind of like super powered version of all these things getting to play together. And, to watch a great actor have an even more exciting time on set because there's better money being spent and there's better resources being devoted to create more space for their performances. And I don't know, I just want to be optimistic. And I do think like we still connect with the performance on a deep level as spectators. And I think as directors, like the most fun thing in the world is to build that relationship with somebody's there to express your words or your ideas. I don't know. I have trouble thinking that there's any rush to abandon that. I know there's all this awesome avatar stuff and the technology is incredible, but I think those will start to serve different utilities. I don't know if that's going to get me to reinterpret Shakespeare. I don't know, but I don't know. We're just kind of riffing a little bit. I mean, you have such a sort of kind of beautiful way to reconnect it back to, sort of the inspiration, the craft. I want to talk a little bit about your Apple ad or counter ad. Because I don't know. I obviously that was your own. You felt called to respond. Just for anybody that hasn't seen it, and assume that we'll be able to pull up the old video and the new video. Can you talk a little bit about what happened? Introduce the old video for a second for people that hadn't seen it, and tell us what happened next.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I woke up and, I don't recommend this, but, sometimes I'll just check my phone right away. It's not necessarily the best for mental health, but, I just, I don't know. I woke up and, it was in the algorithm that came up on X. I mean, I still like calling it Twitter, but and I saw the Apple commercial and I was stunned. It was like it was for the new iPad, but it was just so tone deaf, like especially with everything that everyone is talking about and their concerns. But it's like this machine that crushes everything that's used for creativity, basically, right? And then it crushes it, and then it comes up, and then it shows the iPad. And the only thing they were focused on was the fact that the iPad is thin, this new iPad. Like they completely missed everything else. And I was like in shock. And I mean, I literally was, because, I mean, as a creative, like who played, and grew up in Silicon Valley and played on these, like the first, Final Cut Pro. I mean, Apple has long been known as, the computer for the artist, right? And all of their, think different and all their amazing slogans and what Steve Jobs was all about. And so I was just in shock, and I didn't know what anyone else's reaction to it was at that moment, but I just felt, I was like, oh my God, there is a really simple, elegant fix to this. How did no one see this? And so I just reversed it right there on my phone. I just I recorded it, and then I reversed it, and I was like, will this work? And then it came up, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. But then the song that they had, well, obviously when you reverse it to this, the sound changes, but the song they had, you know, was Sonny and Cher, but the song was tone deaf too. It was more, it wasn't inclusive. It wasn't about us. So I was like, what would be a great Sonny and Cher song that would be about us, that would be more inclusive? I'm like, oh, of course. And I'm like, let's see if that moment of magic will happen where it'll time up if I put it. So I took maybe like 4 or 5, I don't know, not frames in the right word, but like, you know, beats out of the initial part of the song. And then once I did that, it lined up perfectly. And I was like, oh my God, here's magic. I'm just going to throw this out there. And then, you know, then that insanity of going viral, which I, you know, hadn't quite experienced on that level. It was like, I just ended up, you know, having to, at first it was fun. And then it was a little alarming, you know. I was like, wait, my phone, like this is a full-time job right now. But I will say this, what was so cool, because I hadn't seen it on X before, and was there were thousands of comments, and maybe with the exception of one, I don't even know, but like they were all positive. And I was like, wow, this is such a really cool, beautiful place on X, you know, like this, I didn't know that could exist. So that was it. Yeah, it was. I mean, my favorite comment I got was that Steve Jobs would love this, you know.
So simply just reversing it. That was the main. You just played it backwards. And
Yeah, because I watched it. I'm like, wait, like actually, all this stuff, and also like, you know, it crushes the iPad. So it's like a revenge in a way too, because in the reveal, it's like it crushes the iPad, and then it shows all this creativity stuff, you know.
So I mean, it's pretty obvious, but I almost just want to hear, like, what was that? And I think in the context of what people have right or wrong perceptions of what's going on with AI and creativity, what did you think you were standing up for by saying that? What needed to be said, and how does that possibly connect back to what we're talking about?
Well, no, that's really you know, an astute observation on your part. I think I'm always about the artist, you know. I spoke at a event that had over 120, I think. Maybe it was more. I heard it was more actually. At first, I thought it was that many, but it was in China, and it was all their big tech companies and the newer ones coming up. And I ended up, you know, making like the thesis of my talk just be about how important the artist is to this AI revolution, you know, and so really that's what it was about. I mean, it's just that there's no replacing the artist, right? These are all like, you know, tools that we use. And I was, you know, I mean, I have a really vivid imagination. So when I first heard about this AI stuff and what people were saying you could do, and I'm also aware of how the media works and publicity and all that stuff. So I know, you know, I have a healthy skepticism about stuff. I'm like, well, let me see, you know, can it really do that? And, you know, I was impressed with what it could do, but I was also, you know, like, oh yeah, no, this needs some human beings, creative beings to be at its, you know, to help shape it, to help guide it, or to, you know, to speak to it, or to ask what it needs, or, you know, however it is your approach is to it. And so, you know, I don't think the creative is going away. In fact, you know, like first, you know, as an example, like if we're going to be telling stories with AI, right, which we are, in like, let's say in the Hollywood world, or, you know, even beyond, because who knows what the landscape will become with AI, right? Like Hollywood might become everywhere, you know, I don't know. But I know that if we're going to be telling stories, the writer is like super essential. And so I think there's going to be need for more writers, because there's going to be an ability to tell, you know, those stories, or the stories that they've been, you know, that they haven't been able to get made, right? There's going to be a lot of that kind of stuff that's going to come up. So I think, you know, I think there's going to be certain creative positions that is going to be less, because it's going to be able to, you're going to be able to do it. But I also think that the tools are I mean, if the studios, let's say, if the studios, I think, really cared about the creatives that they work with and they say they do and all this stuff, why not pay to train everybody who wants to learn this new technology? It's not like it wouldn't be that hard for them to do, right? And they could, and if someone wants to, I mean, they do that in France. It's amazing. In France, if you're an actor, right, and you're not working, they pay for you to go take classes because they assume that they've done something wrong so that you need to be. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Like,
I mean, I definitely covet the Europe's relationship between government and the arts. I'm not sure that's something Americans can, besides like the National Endowment of the Arts, which is unfortunately mostly challenged these days. No, I love that ad. I love how you responded to it. I mean, I think on the flip side of this, we've talked about this before, that you also spend a lot of time thinking about ethics. And I think you sort of comment on how that's even something that's very important to your agency, which to me implies that, not everything's so rosy, and we do need to sort of have a sort of a point of view, call it responsibility, vigilance. There's a lot of really great work going on in policy in general and the responsible AI, world. I think we're very optimistic often on these kind of conversations, but where do you sort of also share a point of view on concerns, things that we need to be watching out for, worried about,
Yeah. No, I mean, well, you bring up the ethical thing. I mean, that came up kind of organically when I was first working with OpenAI, and and I didn't understand why. I mean, I understood why people as a shorthand, because they couldn't get certain things that they wanted, why they were going to be prompting, names of artists and stuff, right? Like on some level, I kind of got that, but then I was like, don't you want to make your own thing, And so, I was told by some of the people at OpenAI that they hadn't seen prompts like mine. And because I'm a writer, I was approaching, and at the time, because all these things is evolving, and but at the time, like, there was no limit to my prompt that I had to have. So I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And so I just thought, let's see what happens if I almost write it like a little script. And then, so, basically my approach was, and then I ended up like kind of coining this term called ethical prompting, and I just said, wouldn't it be interesting if we all stuck to ethical prompting? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what if we just don't, reference anything? Because I'm not doing that, like what, it's just, I'm just saying what it is that I want to see, but we're not referencing other artists, other movies, other titles, likeness, nothing. Right. And so it actually, I think, forces you as an artist to become really specific about the vision you want to see and not take a shorthand. Now, granted, when we're like making films, like traditionally, right, we'll have a lookbook, or, for the investors or something, just so that they have some idea of what this movie is going to feel like. What's it like being seen before? But, as you mentioned, I've always been drawn to something very unique. So like a girl walks home alone at night, no one had ever made a movie like that before. And I think what's really special about that film is, I mean, obviously, look, I'm biased, but I'm glad a lot of other people love it too. But I think what's really special is, like, for example, you can see Lily, our director's influences, right? But it's its own thing. I mean, you can say that about a lot of directors. Like, I think, I mean, some people might argue, but like, Tarantino or whatever, like you can see his influences, but it's his voice, and it's in there. So, but I was like, you know what, who cares? Like, let's just completely take away any references and just make, what's the story I'm trying to tell, and and it also requires a lot of, research and decision making that I think a director inherently makes, because you have to decide on the overall like look of the thing, the costumes, basically everything in the mise en scène, right? The subject, the camera, the lens. And so, you have to know kind of what it is you're doing. And so I don't know. I think it's very possible, frankly. And it's been really cool to, like form this company with like-minded people, to say, you know what, let's do that. And then what's nice is honestly, you can show your clients, later and just, or, not the clients, but if someone has a problem or something, you can just have a track record of the prompts and be like, look, this is what this is. Now, I do think, I'm curious to see where some of these court battles are going to end up, because I think that is going to, in the end, determine just where we go, and I think, so we just kind of stay open to all that and follow the rules as they are. But it's an amazing tool that I can't, I never have a shortage of creative ideas. And the fact that I know that at any moment, like I actually have now come to the fact, I'm like, yeah, we can make, we can make all this stuff with AI quickly. Okay. Yes. But even then we still can't make everything that, I'd love to make, because you have to put care into the story, into the time, and it's still limited. But maybe I can make, let's say, like 10 more of them before I die or something, and that would be really amazing.
Do you ever think about going backwards to films you've made before, or like how would you have made them totally differently? Do you ever go through that thought puzzle?
I have with, you do that anyway on some level sometimes, right? Because, I'm not like, at that, like kind of Stanley Kubrick level of continually tinkering, till the end with these amazing works of art. But I'm I'm also of this, because I come from theater originally, and I think that helped me understand that this was yours now, like once we put it up. And so, projects that weren't finished, or, because there are projects like that, or, that have yet to see the light of day, I do think about that. But it also has to be right for it, because you're just, but, I have, maybe with one project in particular, I have thought about, okay, we didn't have enough money to do that full on version. So, we ended up rewriting in order to fit with the money we had. But now, maybe I would attempt to do that full on version, because I think we could, it would make sense financially.
I wonder how many people are going into back catalogs. Maybe coming back to the ethics question. So if I'm hearing you, I think where you've applied this very much as an artist, as a creator, is, the act of like, I'm not just going to say, make it like Christopher Nolan, or, like you're saying, no, I'm challenging myself to actually write this. I'm trying to work with this tool to generate my idea. So it sounds like that's where your head's at on one aspect of ethics. But do you think, like, there's so many other worries. Whether it's algorithmic bias or, a lot of stuff that's a bit more native to the documentary space, there's a lot of concerns about messing with the historical record and just how much fun that seems to be for people playing with tools. It's sort of a slippery space. And again, it's easy to just think about what our good friends that are artists want to do this stuff, but it's hard not to wonder what bad actors want to do. I have my own slippery slope on this question, but are there some unintended consequences when you unleash this much power? Are there some kind of things that maybe we really need to also kind of get best practices going, or things that maybe do lose a little bit of sleep? We're all sort of concerned about misinformation and whatnot. I don't know. I don't know if any of those are the right answers.
The fact that we're at a place where you can now doubt anything that you see on a screen, that is, whether it's real or not, that you can have that in the back of your mind, especially if you're not, like us, like kind of continually seeing what the latest tech is, and so you're like kind of aware of like, okay, I know that's possible, but like for that's a really advanced. I mean, we're spending a lot of time and energy within that space, with the newest companies. So we're, like I feel like I can tell, you know what I mean? But I know that a lot of people can't. So that is not only that they can't tell, but that they're questioning, whether something is real. So even if it is, but maybe if it doesn't align with what they think it should be, that's a problem. Or, if something is being tampered with. I mean, I saw a bit of new technology, which, again, unfortunately I have to, not be able to say much about it, but it's like what it can do is alarming in the way that you say that. It's like, oh wow, okay, this can actually fool people, because I used it and I fooled my wife, who knows me, right? And it was something I hadn't done myself, and to be able to see that. So that, like you say, I mean, look, I'm not more concerned, but I'm concerned about um uh the rapid rate of information and how it can be gathered and put together. So like in the hands of a government that's very authoritarian, or what that all looks like. I know a little bit about me, but like one of the things that I was the able to actually be, as far as I know, the only person in AI to actually get good press was around generating actors in a under in like with Iran, in an Iranian film, to be able to generate an actor that couldn't be arrested for what they did, because they're generated, they're not real. That's and so
Can you talk more about that? Can you tell us more about that
so
example?
so when I got invited to with Tribeca and OpenAI, when they were going to do their first OpenAI was going to do their first film festival, and I got invited to make my film. I knew it was going to get a lot of press, right? And so I was like, wow, I need to do something that's I feel really important about, like that's important to me, and can actually carry the weight of this platform. And at the time, Iran had fallen out of the news cycle, especially with what was going on with the women in Iran. And I was like, you know what, I want to make something about this. But then I'd had this idea. I'm like, what's interesting is you can, in a government like Iran that has tremendous amount of censorship, like, maybe it can inspire some filmmakers there, but like you can actually make a movie with AI and have the actors do things that they would normally be arrested for or killed, right? So like, in my, not that that's solely what it's about, but, there's like certain images where I know, that if it was real actors doing that, they would be killed, right? And so my idea was like, look, in governments that have tremendous amount of censorship, you can use AI to bypass that. And that was a really a cool, I'm not cool isn't the right word, but it was a idea that resonated, like in with a lot of people. And what's interesting is even though it hasn't been shown to the rest of the world, I mean, unless you were at that screening, because it's being considered for other festivals. But I did grant permission for the BBC live streamed it to Iran and Tajikistan, and I'm trying to remember, was it maybe Afghanistan? So it's like the first AI film to be streamed live in those countries. And for me, it was great because it was accompanied with a message of solidarity, with the people there. Of course, I've got messages from Iranian directors who are like, wow, bravo, this is really cool. I want to, investigate this. And, I was like, well, look, yeah, the actors can't be arrested, but the filmmaker can still. So, you have to do that anonymously. But yeah, that was the idea, which I think is really amazing way to use AI. It's called Let Your Hair Down. I just gotten access to Sora, and with these tools, you have to learn its language that it speaks to. That's why I'm not a big fan. I mean, I understand why people do it because it's easy or whatever, but I'm not a big fan of these comparisons that people put online. Like, look at this tool. I put this prompt in, and I'm like, no, that's not how it works. You know what I mean? The prompt works well for that one, and maybe it doesn't work well for this one. It's like, that's not my approach anyway. So in order to, we had a really compressed amount of time, but what I saw that, immediately it could do really well was like just the way that I dream, which is different than like, some of the things I've seen. And, I was a big fan of, Paul Trillo's work, that he had done. And it was really cool to see that. And I was like, okay, well that, but it was different than that, and I was like, okay, well and I figured out a way. So that coupled with, poetry being very important to us Iranians, and we have a long history and some of the greatest, poets to ever do it. And we quote poets. Those two ideas and the idea of like, doing something around an Iranian woman, and they kind of, came together. I'm keeping it a little cagey, but like, those ideas came together, and then, some of my perceptions as a child living through that war-torn, civil war, basically, they call it the Iranian Revolution, but my perception of that as well, all these came together to kind of create this 4-minute film. And again, it was really interesting because this is the first time I've ever had a movie at a festival that was going to have a premiere date, but we were also in production while the festival was on. But that's what you can do with AI, right? But I was like really nervous, I think we all were like, wait, what? Like, this is crazy. We had a really compressed amount of time to make it.
Well, I hope those don't become new assumptions of how we make stuff. It'd be nice to be able to finish things normally before we put them out there. But I mean, this sort of goes to like one of my last questions, but like one of my favorite things to sort of dream a little bit about is like, what are these assumptions that we're all stuck on of how things work, how things are supposed to work? I love hearing this idea of this film that we're very excited to see when it's available. But here's an unmakeable film. So that here's a story that, and not just maybe for resources or the common reasons why things don't get made, but like somebody's life would have been in danger. I worry a little bit about your life. I don't know why you're off the hook as a filmmaker, but I guess actors would have been particularly.
I've already been banned from Iran, so it was an incredible decision at a film called Circumstance. That I knew, in order to do that film, I wasn't going to be able to go back and see my family there, right? And so it was a really weighty decision, as you can imagine. It's not like, oh, I just want to do a movie. It's just like, there was a lot to it, and I just believed in the film so much, and the kind of faith I had inside. And it's funny because when I thought about it later, I was like, that's crazy. Like, what if the movie turned out shitty, right? Like you made this decision, but the movie ended up premiering at Sundance and won the audience award that year and made competition. And we created a change with the diaspora of Iranian cinema, which then led to like kind of A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, and there's been many others. So it was really a wonderful time. So I'm accustomed to that. When our film premiered, the Iranian government made a statement against it, and actually all the statements they said were accurate about the film. Funny enough, but yeah. So I'm accustomed to that. But also I will say this, like there was a 60 Minutes piece that came out, and how the Iranian government, has been silencing voices outside of Iran, with like kidnapping people, attempting to kill them. Most recently, Masih Alinejad, like they were, trying to do that with her. And actually, I mean, even I heard there was talk about. I mean, they're denying it, but the State Department, made an issue statement that they were after Trump as well. But I knew that I just was like, you know what, we can't live in this fear of this. We can't be silenced. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm like, you know what?
But what a powerful tool that kind of gives you a new range of ways to connect with topics, stories, things that normally you have to run through some pretty real senses of personal safety.
And by the way, I just want to say this too, just that the filmmakers in Iran, what I did pales in comparison to what these artists in Iran who live there have made films, sneaked them out and have gone to prison, have been tortured. One was murdered recently on the streets, although, they say, that they got the murder, but we all know, what happened. I mean, so yeah, I mean, if we, it's just, for me, it's just adding a small voice to this, and I think it's our duty, as responsible citizens of the world.
I think what's interesting about this art form is that we're also interacting with something that at times is philosophical. It's often a commentary on industry and economics. Like there's just so many things. Where does, like, who do you follow in terms of thought leadership? Like, who are people that inspire you to even just think about where does this all sit in some greater kind of shift that we're all going through?
Yeah, thought leaders. That's interesting. Because I mean,
I'm basically asking who should I be following, and I'm just trying to catch up to you. So,
No, I mean, I think you probably know everybody. I'm not like, there isn't like because I feel like, the people that I know, I mean, I certainly know that, like, some of them, in terms of, what I've found is been really interesting, not necessarily people that I follow, but it's like the events I've gone to have, in-person conversations, right? So I loved, I got invited to, they ended up screening this film that we were talking about, the SORA film in San Francisco for the OpenAI offices. And I went there and it was such a great experience. And before the screening, all the SORA programmers we met, and we were having lunch. And then we just started kind of like nerding out and talking about the technology, but then also kind of like certain philosophical things around it. And it ended up, I mean, for me, it was really kind of exciting because, I could, run some idea. I'm like, do you think this will be possible? And they'll be like, yeah, for sure. In like 6 months, I'm like, what about this? And, so we would, have that kind of thing. But then I heard that, they went away, for after I left for about 2 hours, and they hadn't been like inspired like that, and had a whiteboard kind of session of like new ideas and where to go. So I find those kind of, again, in person conversations are have been the most rewarding, or like with some of our common friends that we've that we're working with, kind of late night around a fire, like after an event or something. And then all of a sudden, it's you hear about like people's influences and kind of a lot of the indie films that moved them and what, they're still trying to do. And then it's be like, wouldn't it be amazing to kind of see another reiteration of this in this manner? And those, I find those conversations are really great. And I feel like that's kind of the most exciting to me, in terms of thoughts around AI. And I guess the simplest way to say it is almost like the artists and the technologists kind of coming together is really interesting. I didn't have that experience, honestly, in traditional filmmaking. I mean, maybe a few times where like someone had this lens that had this history, and I could almost like honor that, be like, oh my God, this lens, was shot on this camera and this film, and you're telling me this, and we're bringing that energy into our film. There was a little bit of that, but now it's almost like, you're influencing each other in terms of, because a lot of the technologists that I've met with and engineers, they don't have a broad film background, cinema background. And so it's really amazing to kind of bring that into their world and, have them grapple with it and see it and get inspired. And then, likewise for them to be able to say, it's like when I don't know if have you written screenplays? I don't, are you?
I mean, I did, and then realized I wasn't very good at it. So,
well, it's like when you sit down, I mean, you want to, because I'm also a producer and, director but like an actor, like sometimes you just want to completely shut off all those other minds, right? And just write the thing as it is purely, so you're not there with any restrictions. So, and I've written movies like that, and then, and some of them have gotten made, and then we had to, like kind of bring it back down to earth a little bit in terms of what was possible. But I feel like when you're having these conversations and getting really excited, it has that same feeling, because you go in and you're like, what if this is possible? And they're also saying, yeah, that is, and they're not saying no, which is really interesting to me. I think I don't know, I'm really excited about this time, and I want to continue, with this enthusiasm and like bring as many of my friends or make new friends, and I can't say it enough, because in case there are people who watch this who are kind of new to all this stuff, but the AI community is very kind, which is really interesting to me because they receive a lot of hate too, but my experience has been everyone's really kind, sharing information, forming community, bringing in when and new people come in, very welcoming. So, if you're interested in entering it, there's no safer space I've seen, frankly.
I mean, I think that's kind of what I would come back to, and why I'm excited to talk to you today, is that I think we're in this sort of phase that I've felt before in other kind of cycles, that there's like this misfit phase that a lot of people show up early. Like it's always interesting who shows up, like who's like, I want to try that. Some people wait and see. Some people, have their heads in the ground. Some people read about it in Wired magazine, but it's always a very interesting mix of it isn't even just early adopters. It's like second wave tinkerers. Like it's an interesting group of folks, and I'm excited that you're a part of it and that I'm getting to meet you. What are you surprised I didn't ask you about today? Is there anything that we left on the table?
No, you covered a lot. I mean, sometimes, you always wonder, like if not always wonder, but because AI, has been controversial, right? And so like, you kind of wonder what those questions are like, but I'm just kind of, I just try to speak from the heart, so, but I wasn't, no, I feel like you, were very thorough.
Okay. Just making sure we didn't leave anything on the table, Reza. Look, my favorite thing that you said today is like, I love this idea of your dream filmmaking. Like, because to me that's like such a great example of like something you couldn't do before. Like you could get up and write it down, and then hopefully you remember what that weird you had in the middle of the night. But to think that you could just have that laptop and just quickly just like throw a little prompt together and just let it generate and go back to sleep, that is so much fun. Like everybody should do this. like it is its own like Instagram feed of just like things that I can't believe I dreamed of last night and I actually got to somehow capture.
You don't even have to, just to make it a little more practical. It's like you don't even have to get on your laptop. I just would roll over, get my phone, and then, put it in there. And then at the time there was like kind of different, generation kind of time, with that particular tool I was using, but I would just set it down and then, set a timer and then, come back and be pleasantly, surprised. There is this magic to it. I liken it to like, cause I love photography. I liken it to, taking Polaroids. It's like, a generation is like, for me, it feels like when I, take a Polaroid, and I still shoot with Polaroid, but it's like, as you're waiting for that film to develop, and you're seeing it kind of come, it's magical. And, I feel like we get that feeling with these generations.
Yeah, I mean, I had a chapter of being a photographer, and I think I sort of often lament that my sort of joy for photography kind of got crushed by Instagram and sort of just how accessible it suddenly became. So I liked feeling like I knew how to do something, that I was in some unique position. But part of the joy was the developing of the film phase, like just having to wait a few days, like not knowing what you got. There's something about that, and I agree. There's something about the slower renders. We got some pretty fast rendering tools too that are skipping past it, but there is that Christmas morning feeling when an amazing generation pops up that is pretty special. I'm so thankful for your time today. Thanks for helping me kind of cut my teeth today. But this, look, I think there's a lot to learn from people that are out there, kind of also with a spirit of inquiry, also with a spirit of, I get from you a humility and sort of openness to kind of also be surprised, and I think that's, so many people are going through a lot right now that they're sort of, industry is rug pulled a little bit. And I think they're simultaneously polarized because there's some kind of, negative impressions they have of this technology, but there's also these false impressions that it's just like a quick fix either. Like, I think what you've really articulated so well today is like, no, there's still work. First of all, work to do, work to build teams on, work to enjoy being in person and starting to imagine a workflow and a creative workplace of the present and near future. But also, the really talented writers and creators out there should get excited that this is something that's, kind of invites them to continue to do their best work. I think there's a lot of economic questions and a lot of ecosystems that aren't resolved. But for people that, are here because this is what they love to do, I think if we can all learn from you and other people that are kind of getting to walk into it with curiosity, there's something to pay attention to. There's something to find your way through. And I get excited learning about your journeys, and I thank you for sharing them today. We'll also find out about this mysterious project at some point, which I don't know, this like amazing thing that's coming that you're like, you caveated a couple ways, but we'd love you to share.
There are different projects actually. Yeah, we have. So there's going to be some really wonderful announcements coming, but there's paperwork and when you're doing kind of bigger projects, it just requires more, and it's funny because I feel like in this AI space, I see there's a lot of almost like a kind of an immediate gratification vibe energy, so like the fact that you can, make something quickly and then post it, and get reactions, which is great, on one level. Like I certainly understand that, but I also think, I don't know, there's something to taking time with things,
I want to end on that thought too. I think there's so much excitement, especially when the tools keep getting better and better and what we're suddenly able to do. But the old man in me thinks that the best things take time. I don't know. Like I think it didn't get better because it got made faster. Maybe it got more resourceful. Maybe it got more accessible. But I want to believe that, we're all going to sort of start to, love and appreciate the steeping process of a good tea, or, the fermentation process of a nice wine or cheese. But, as you sit in Italy, I'm sure all these things are extra meaningful as references.
That is exactly right. They, this is one of the places I've seen is they know how to live here, like they're not rushing, it's like a meal is a meal. And when you get in line for something, it's like you can just sense the energy, but there's such a humanity and love for it, and I mean, it's like some of the, to me, it's a really interesting time to be in Florence specifically because, this epicenter of Renaissance art, and to walk around and then at the same time be watching, this whole new technology evolve. And, to see like, what are the parallels between the energy that was felt, at the time, and, learning a lot about that and then seeing the artwork and being so inspired, but then, to see this other energy that's really kind of exciting as well. Like, and that's going to be, changing the world and hopefully for the good mostly, but we also know that, there's gonna be other, but it's a interesting parallel. And not to say that, anyone, has made, art yet that is of the, kind of impact that some of the art I've seen here in the museums, but there is this incredible energy that I'm just sensing, that we can feel, and it's like everything is changing. It's incredible. It's really incredible that we're part of, what we get to be a part of. I think that we get to live through this and see what happens.
And I don't know. Now we're starting to this call will never end, but I just want to respond to that. I spent a lot of time thinking about the Renaissance and emergent technologies, and people often like to talk about the printing press and even like the Medicis, and there's like this whole like financial narrative too. But I think back to like how, if I'm getting my art history right, like up until a certain point, to be an artist, I think on some broad level was mean like you made religious imagery. You sort of it was a utility. It was kind of a means to an end that there was sort of a purpose for the art. I think that idea that out of the Renaissance, I think I'm getting my art history right. That was kind of early days when we were seeing art for art's sake. That it was somebody's point of view. It was somebody's expression. And I think that's kind of, if I did get all my art history right, and there's enough true there, I think that's what I want to take away from this moment. And like all those other turning points when more people got to make stuff, it usually led to more stuff and more for a lot of people, and eventually new jobs that didn't exist yet, and new types of opportunities for young people or old people saying, I want to make stuff. So I'm kind of glossing over a lot of it, but I think that's where my optimism is that I think the trends tend to be that if we can stomach the transitions and the sort of there aren't that many color timers and negative splicers left in film as there used to be. There's a lot of other cool stuff to get excited about. So we'll see. Let's see where it all lands.
I think you're right. And I think I just want to say one quick thing about that, which is I think we have to, which is, what I'm trying to do, but I think we have to take action to help make that happen, because we're in this wonderful position where we can, understand what this part is and understand what that part is, but both we can see the whole thing, right, on some level, and not see it understand it, more than anyone else. But I just mean we've had our feet in both worlds, and so for me, it's just kind of like really important. Then, okay, well, let's take action to bring it to people in a meaningful way, versus let me just get mine, which I think, is easy to do and lose sight of,
I love that. We're building ecosystems. We're building new ecosystems. And I think it's exciting to see it that way. Thank you so much for your perspective on this.
For having me. Really.
And I'm also excited about the project that we have cooking that we'll hopefully have more to talk about soon, but
yeah, absolutely.
The full disclosure there, we're sort of collaborators, but thank you. I really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you. Take care, Fred.
That's it for this episode of the Curious Refuge podcast. Thank you for listening. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe on whatever audio platform you're using to listen to podcasts. And if you're interested in AI filmmaking, please do check out our website. We'd love to have you join our community. And if you want a weekly deep dive into AI news, check out our other podcasts from me, Jagger Waters, and Caleb. We get together to talk about what's going on in the news. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.